Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you are doing well. My name is Maggie Legrand, and I am a national volunteer for ODK. I graduated from East Carolina University with their ODK chapter there. I'm currently teaching world history for ninth graders in North Carolina. I'm right outside of Charlotte. Please remember while we're doing this session that to mute your microphone, use the chat feature to ask questions. And an evaluation.
Maggie and Herb, we're going live.
Oh.
Live stream is in process.
Hello, my name is Herb Rubenstein. We have this seminar on leadership and life planning. I'd like Maggie Legrand, who is going to have an instrumental and important co-presenter role, to introduce herself. She will be in charge of the chat box, the chat room, and I want all of you to participate. You may have comments and questions. You may disagree with something that I say. You may have your own ideas for how to do this life planning exercise even better. Maggie, let me turn that over to you to let people know who you are and your role in ODK.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Maggie Legrand, and I am a national volunteer. I graduated from East Carolina University in 2015, and I was a member of ODK there. I'm a teacher. I currently teach world history for Gaston County Schools, and I'm also your moderator for the session. So please make sure that you're muted during the session. Please feel free to use the chat box to answer questions. Also, there is an evaluation link in your session, so please make sure to fill that out to give her adequate feedback. And Herb, if you would like to introduce yourself, and we are excited to hear from you.
Well, thank you very much. I actually have trained educators in Greenville, North Carolina. I'm the author of the book Leadership for Lawyers, published first edition by the National Institute of Trial Advocacy and the second edition by the American Bar Association. After I wrote that book, I realized that teachers were generally not trained in leadership, and I thought, between me and you, I thought that was a disgrace in America that teachers were not given the leadership training, because all our teachers, if you're going to be a teacher someday, what a blessing you will be for all of us. I want you to be trained in leadership, and that's why I put together a team to write the book Leadership Development for Educators. A school superintendent, a national researcher, all participated with me. I'm a lawyer. I'm a professional golfer. One of my life goals was to go to school on scholarship. That was the only way I was going to get there. And I got a scholarship to Washington and Lee University. I was able to play on the golf team. I then got a scholarship to the University of Bristol, England, based on the Rotary Foundation, and it's a brilliant scholarship. They basically write you one check at the beginning of the year. You apply through your home state. Your parents can't be Rotary members, of course, but you apply through your home state if you get selected, and you pick 3 universities around the world in 3 different countries. They then would select one of those universities. You apply, you almost always get in, and that's no problem. And they write you a check and you're there. You don't even have to take exams. I took exams because I like degrees. And then I got a scholarship. I was the Lyndon Baines Johnson Scholar at the LBJ School of Public Affairs of the University of Texas, where they taught us how to be effective in government. And I'm telling you this story because today we're going to work through a process. I hope you have either notes, or you can open up a separate window of your computer, because I want you to take notes. This is a highly interactive process. Maggie is going to, more than once, I hope, more than 10 times, I hope, say, Herb, we have this comment, I'd like for you to address it. So I did receive a scholarship to Georgetown Law School, and I turned it down. I said, I will pay for Georgetown Law School. Now, this was back in the 1970s. Law school wasn't that expensive, but also I had a great job. I worked on for the American Institutes for Research, and I had a scholarship to the day program, the full-time program, and I asked to defer that for a year and then go to the night program. And they said, Herb, you can go to the night program, but we don't have scholarships for the night program. And I said, I don't want your scholarship. So that was a change. I had to pay back a lot of student loans I never expected, but it was worth it. So one of the other things that I've done that I want you to be thinking about is I'm a board member, a founding board member of the Association of Professional Futurists. I became a golf pro only just a few years ago when I was 65 years old, although I played in college and I played in high school. And so I'm now working on a book on improving the legal profession. So let's get started. I am dedicating this seminar to two people, Frederick Douglass, and to his biographer, Dr. David Blight at Yale University. In addition to Dr. John Gunn, I decided to leave the United States well before I did. I was at Washington University. I decided I wanted to leave the country. Professor Gunn came up to me and said, I've heard you talking to a student. They said you want to leave the country. They said, are you going to graduate first? And I said, absolutely. He said, good. Why don't I get you a scholarship when you leave the country? And he helped me get that Rotary scholarship. So you are a leader for tomorrow. And what I want you to begin to think about, why have I dedicated this to these three people? First of all, as a leader, you have to have an acknowledgement strategy. If you're taking notes, now, by the way, you already have an acknowledgement strategy. You probably don't know what it is. Some leaders acknowledge people by criticizing them, by finding their mistakes, by yelling at them, by trying to make them look foolish, by mimicking or mocking them. That's an acknowledgement strategy. It's a negative acknowledgement strategy, and it's really stupid. Some people have a simple acknowledgement strategy. They acknowledge people early and often. They acknowledge people when they give them an idea. If I had not read Frederick Douglass, The Prophet by David Blight, if I had not read this book, I would not be here today. It's not here because I'm not here because I was elected to ODK in 1974. I'm here because when I study the life of Frederick Douglass, I know he had a plan. He had a plan for each phase of his life. He had a plan for the United States. And so Frederick Douglass may be one of the greatest people who's ever lived on this soil from the beginning of humans on this soil. He showed me as to how, through David Blight's work, and I've had the chance of meeting David Blight. Our son at Yale has interviewed David Blight. David Blight has spoken to Washington and Lee about this book and the New York City Bar Association, two places where I'm pretty comfortable and familiar. So I want you to have an acknowledgement strategy. It might be thank people twice. It might be catch people doing something right around you and acknowledge that. So that's why I'm dedicating this to them. Now, you see a slide in front of you. This slide violates one of the most important rules of PowerPoint. It has too many words. So I'm not going to read this slide to you because that would violate another important rule of PowerPoint. Never read your slides. It's unprofessional. It's what we call slide whipping. So the issue is, why should you even do a life planning exercise? The purpose of a plan is not to achieve exactly what's in the plan. The purpose of a plan is to do better than what you would do if you didn't have a plan. So clearly, and you know a lot of this, by the way, all of you taking this course, these are your slides. And for anyone who's at this conference, these are your slides. You can give them away to others. I've put them in the public domain. You also, if you want to print them, and you know this, I don't know why anybody prints almost anything anymore, but you might want to print them and hand them to somebody. Just cut and paste, copy the slides, get a plain background, because you're not printing. Please don't print with all the black ink that you're going to get and the white coloring for the, just print it on white paper and you'll have it. So first of all, you have to have a goal. What most people don't quite get is that in order to have a goal that makes sense for you, it has to be consistent with your theme of your life. Now, you're young, you're going to have more than one theme in your life. I'm an author, educator, professional golfer, lawyer. My new website will have all 4 of those corners of my life clearly explained. But there is a theme. The second theme you need is when you take an educational course, you have to have a sense of trust that this exercise is going to be useful. So flexibility, you have to make changes in your decisions after you've planned them out. Today, you're not going to make any decisions. I'm not here to help you decide the 3 things you want to do in the next decade, the 3 things you want to do in the following decade. This is just a creative exercise. I want you to write down some paths, write down some ideas. For me, my paths were golf and education in reverse order. Education always came first. And so let's talk about one of the things Gandhi says is there's no path to peace. Peace is the path to peace. Well, when I told you earlier, you have to have a goal. A goal is a pretty mundane word. You've actually got to have a vision. And what I say is, on a good day, I don't work in an industry. I work on an industry. I've been a lawyer for nearly 40 years, writing this book on the future of the legal profession. I've changed the legal profession because I was the first person ever to write a book, a lawyer, first lawyer ever to write a book on leadership for lawyers. I'm proud to say 3 other authors have written a book titled Leadership for Lawyers after I wrote mine. Because one of the things leaders do is they create this thing called repeatability. Others do what you do. We call it leadership by example, but that's really not a very good explanation. It's repeatability. You know you're a leader because people repeat what you do. Well, I say you need a vision, not just a goal. There is no path to vision. Vision is the path to vision. It is a creative act. And so let's talk about 3 types of vision. And the reason a vision is so important, it actually helps form your identity. So we're talking about serious stuff here. We're not talking about an idea. By the way, most people think we have ideas. They have ideas. I actually think ideas have you. You ever try to get rid of a song in your head and you just can't get rid of it? You ever try to get rid of a thought? You just can't get rid of it. Thoughts are floating all around the universe all the time. And I've had the privilege of spending some time in Africa, watching trees communicate with other trees that the bees are coming. Put out your scent. The bees are coming. Put out your scent so they won't all land on you, the tree. And so the idea is that your identity, what you're able to do in life, what you want to do in life, what you think you're capable of doing in life, your source of confidence comes from your vision of how you see you fitting in life, creating accomplishments, yes, and creating some failures along the way. We all do that. I tell people I fail. probably 99 times a day, but I also succeed a couple hundred times a day. So there are three types of vision. The first one is I'm going to call short term. You can read this. This is something you're already good at. I know you're good at it. I know Maggie's good at it. She graduated from ECU. She got a teaching certificate. She's standing in front of ninth graders teaching them about world history. And she has the challenge of world history is changing every day. And if you think the COVID pandemic has not completely changed world history, you are wrong. International relations will be affected for the next 30 years. Some nations will cease to exist because of COVID. They will be taken over by other nations. Borders will change because of COVID. International strategic alliances will change because of COVID. International flow of capital and trade will change permanently because of COVID. The relationship of the citizen to the government in many countries will change because of COVID. And so short term, you're already able to complete tasks on time, on budget, in an acceptable manner. You've got that one. Middle term, what's the next big thing for you? How do you identify that? For me, while I was in high school, it was college. But it wasn't just college. I knew I was going to go to college. I knew I was going to go to graduate school. I ended up going to 2 of those. And I knew after graduate school, I was going to go to law school. And I knew I was going to play on the college golf team from the time I was probably 8 years old. And so to make way for graduate school, to make way for law school, I quit golf for 10 years. Didn't touch a club. It was not appropriate. Got married, had a couple of children, went to law school at night. I was consulting for the American Institutes for Research and I worked for the National Academy of Sciences. Then I went to work for the US Department of Health and Human Services. I always knew, and this gets into a little bit of longer term, but when I was in law school, I knew the first law firm I was going to work for before I went to law school. And that was going to be the law offices of Herbert Rubenstein. I was going to work for myself. I wasn't going to work for a big corporate law firm. That's not who I am. That does not fit with my theme. So my middle term, you have to be thinking years in advance. And here's the benefit of that. Some people took the bar exam so they could get a job. Some people took the bar exam so they could be a lawyer. I took the DC bar exam, then immediately 6 months later, I took the Virginia bar exam, and then I took the Maryland bar exam because I knew I was going to have a law office in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I used to run 40 miles a week. There'd be some days when I would jog in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I knew people in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. So I took 3 bar exams. And I didn't just take 3 bar exams and all the study courses for that so I could practice law in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. I took the bar exams so I could learn what I needed to learn to be an effective lawyer. So I was never scared to walk into any court anywhere in the country. I now have a case in Colorado, had cases in Pennsylvania, Florida. I know how to practice. Obviously, people have to help me in each local jurisdiction. I can practice anywhere in this country. So the middle term is once you know why you're doing something, you know the why behind your vision and behind your idea, your mind will start collecting information. And it'll start processing it whether you know it or not, and you'll be more prepared to achieve that next vision. And then in the longer term, Frederick Douglass in 1852 called, meaning asked for, wrote in favor of something we now call the Civil War. He declared this would be, should be, had to be the war to end slavery on our soil. People can tell you what the Civil War was about, and they might have different points of view. Frederick Douglass didn't start the Civil War. He advised people in the Union, in America, who had to respond to the starting of the Civil War. But he was clear on the purpose of that war and why it had to be fought. That was a tragic, terrible war. But Frederick Douglass was clear 10 years, 8 years, 9 years before it happened. This is a war that had to happen. And he was right. And he prepared and helped others prepare for that Civil War and prepared to win it. The longer term is when you see the directions where you want to go, where you see the directions where you want the world to go, where your profession goes, where your family goes, where your country goes. And you will, and you will have many different visions in many different areas. They all have to be consistent. They all have to be based on the same values. And Frederick Douglass's value was very simple: freedom for every human being. That was it. And to make it even clearer, his value was even more simple than that. It was freedom itself. And so what we're going to do, and we're doing this because Frederick Douglass had to escape slavery. He had to learn how to read. And nobody really learns how to read on their own. There were people that helped them learn how to read. And remember, in many states in the Confederacy, there were laws called the anti-literacy law, not the anti-illiteracy law. These were laws that prevented people from teaching slaves how to read and write. He, in spite of those laws, had people help him learn how to read and write, and he learned maybe one of the most brilliant writers. He wrote 3 of his own autobiographies. Brilliant writer, clearly the best speaker in the 19th century in America, the most photographed person in America, maybe other than Ulysses Grant. But he was clearly, Frederick Douglass was the person who more people in the United States, meaning in America, heard speak in the 19th century than any other human being. So in the short term, what did Frederick Douglass have to do? He had to learn how to read, he had to learn how to work, he had to learn how to be strong, have courage, set goals. Fine, he knew that, he did it. Middle term, when he, had to be 10, 11, 12, because I was talking short term, what did he do before he was 10? Middle term, he had to escape from slavery, learn to read and write, speak brilliantly. He had to earn money. He had to be resourceful. He had to be a visionary. And in the long term, what did he have to do? He had to end slavery. He had to become famous. He had a duty to become famous, which means he had a duty to build his reputation. He had his duty to have good values, be honest, work hard. And he traveled. He traveled to England when his life was threatened in the United States. He took off. He went to England, came back. He learned a lot in England. So this is the first exercise. What I want you to do, this is your leadership roadmap, or in effect, your own life planning exercise. Real simple. Write down 5 or 10 things you want to accomplish by December 31, 2020. And I'm going to speak a little bit as you do this, but I want you to take some time. And it's not, now, taking a trip, none of us have been able to take hardly any trips, haven't been on an airplane since January of 2020. I'm usually on an airplane 2, 3, 4 times a month. That's okay. So I'll take a trip to New Orleans in November. That's not really something I want to accomplish. When I talk about something you want to accomplish, generally it means something that will impact others, something that will contribute to your ability in the future to impact others. I know because I'm a PGA golf professional, just this past week, the 3 best young golfers in the Brooklyn, Queens, New York area, ages 10 to 12, have hired me to be their golf instructor. Reason, and I run the largest PGA junior league in the United States based on scholarships. All of my students are people of color or new immigrants, because I became a golf pro to expand the great game of golf for minorities and women and new immigrants. So that's why I became a golf pro. That was my vision. There was a time when I became a great golfer because I just loved the game. I wanted to do it. I like to win trophies. I like to win tournaments. I love to compete. So write down 5 or 10 pretty big things you want to accomplish by the end of this year. One of mine is I want to complete the writing of a book on the future of the legal profession. I won't tell you the title of it. The publisher, when I get a publisher, and I'm sure I will. So one big thing I want to accomplish is get a publisher. That will happen, I think, in the next 60 days. But the only purpose of that is so that I write the book. And so take a few moments and take a look. Now that maybe you've written 5 or 10 things down, here's an important question you might not ask. Are you equally confident you'll be able to achieve each and every one of them? So what I want you to do is put down a capital C if you're very confident, and put down a little c if you're not confident. Are there some things that you want to accomplish that are going to require some help and support for others? Well, first of all, I need a publisher. I need readers who are going to read and advise me. I need to do interviews, so I need their time. And in all those respects, yes, I need help to accomplish something as big as writing a very important book in the legal profession. And so now I want you to do something different. Put a priority order, 1, 2, 3, go all the way to 10. You're going to start to see, if you wrote down 10 things, number 8, 9, and 10 are probably, frankly, not that important. But put a priority order and take a moment. I'm going to be silent now for about a minute. Take a moment, because this is important. Now, all these things are going to change over time. So you can write down 1 through 10 pretty quickly. And maybe you wrote them initially in that order. And so as you now reflect on this draft and look at this draft, take another minute. What's the result you want, at least for the top 3? You want to accomplish something? What's the result? For me, it's very clear. Out of about 29,000 PGA members, there are only about 100 African American members. This is not acceptable to me in 2021. It's part of the work I'm going to do in professional golf. Many of us working together are going to expand that number of African American Professional Golf Association members into the 1,000 before I die. Into the thousands before I die. And I'm going to educate young African American, Asian, immigrant children about the game of golf, and we're going to expand this game. That's all I'm about when it comes to golf. And yes, I like to play in some tournaments, and I like to compete. So that's a very small part of why I'm doing it. So list a key result or a benefit. And Maggie, any comments yet?
Well, we do have some people who are definitely love what you're doing right now with the short-term list and everything. We don't have any questions yet, but you're definitely being well received on the chat box.
Well, so. And feel free to comment, and you can also say things in the chat room like, I've been doing this every year for the last 20 years. What's new here, right? Or, wait a minute, I think you should add this. So all of you need to know on the very last slide is my email address. You can email me at any time with any question that you have about this process. And so this is the short-term vision exercise. Now, first of all, you're already good at this. That's why you've been successful in part. So let's now go to 2022. We're starting in 2022. And we're going to 2031. So I'm going to start this with a story. I'm playing golf with a gentleman, and I usually don't talk much when I play golf because I'm playing golf unless I'm teaching. But we were waiting on the tee. Gentleman from Washington Lee, I'm still in contact with. And I said, Mike, he sold paper, like hundreds and hundreds of pallets or boxes of paper at a time. His orders were huge. He had big companies he sold paper to. I said, Mike, what is it you're going to do in the next week or in the next month that are going to help you sell paper, more paper in the next 2 months? And he said, Herb, there's nothing I can do in the next week that's going to help me sell more paper in the next month. What I do in the next week is going to help me sell more paper next year. And I was shocked by that. You know, relationships with vendors take a long time. He said, I have to offer paper to get a big contract at either 5 times less cost, which I cannot do, 5 times better performance in the contract and guarantees, which sometimes I can do. He said, to convince people and show people how good we are, we have to listen to them for months and months as to what they really want. So now, put at the top of your piece of paper, 2022 to 2031. And you can just put before 2030. 5 things you want to accomplish before 2030. Now for me, graduating from college.
I'm sorry, Herb, we do have a question.
Yes.
So in regards to our list, are personal goals equally important as academic or professional goals?
Your personal goals are equally important to your academic and your professional goals. Absolutely. Part of your theme in life might be, I want to have a family. I want to be single. I want to travel. I want to see the world. And it might be a personal goal that you might want to write your biography. All these things, personal goals. And this is by the way, hire that person. That was a great question. So, and I almost took it for granted, but I guarantee if I ever do this again, I will say personal goals are just as important as professional goals, as just as important as academic goals. They all fit together. One of my personal goals, I'm 67 years old. I want to play in a golf tournament, par 72, and I want to shoot below my age. That's a personal goal. Now, you might say, well, you're a golf professional. Yes, I play in golf tournaments. I would win a little bit of money for doing that, but that's a personal goal. My professional goal is to keep teaching hundreds and hundreds of low-income kids golf and their parents and get them the equipment they need at a price they can afford. So, great question. 5 things, big things, professional or personal, that you want to accomplish before 2030, let's say. And a good example for me, it would have been pretty easy when I'm about to graduate from college. Well, I want to go to graduate school in England. and do well. I want to go to a public policy school because I'm interested. By the way, I ran for Congress about 10 years ago. I was not successful, but the person I then supported won. And I moved to a state with the intention of helping it change from one party affiliation to another. I was successful in accomplishing that. So a third, I wanted to go to law school. I wanted to open up my law practice. I wanted my law practice to be successful. And yes, I wanted to be married and have children. So that would have been easy for me to sketch out the 5 things. But think hard, put down 5 things you want to accomplish in the next decade. And at least one of those should be around 2030. Don't front load it with 5 things you want to accomplish in 2022. Put a date roughly by each one of those. By this date, I want to do this. By this date, I want to do that. And now I'm going to change one thing in the thinking. Remember last time I had you asked you how confident you were in that. Put a capital C or a lowercase c. This time, I want you to put a 1 to 5. If you put a 1 by it, you are very uncertain that this is going to happen. Now, that might be something that's a major goal. When I ran for Congress, I was very uncertain, right? I would have put that as a 1. Am I going to win? One of my opponents spent over $2 million of his own dollars to win. I couldn't do that. But if you're very certain it's going to happen, I knew I was going to run for Congress. I knew I would get on the ballot. I knew I'd get the 1,000 signatures. I knew I could do that, and I did. And so a 5 means you're very certain and everywhere in between. So this is, by the way, now that we're in the middle of this, this all looks pretty easy, right? You've just written the roadmap, just sketching it out for the next 10 years of your life. That's, frankly, if we stopped this program right now, and you had never done this before, and you worked hard on this one and you did it, we've already succeeded, all right? And if anybody has any questions about the next 10 years, you can put big goals, little goals, and by the way, I just said sketch out 5. You might want to do 3, you might want to do 23. This is just your way to write down some things you want to accomplish before 2031. Now, what's going to help you accomplish some of those things over time? The first thing is you wrote it. Or as maybe Maggie and I would say, being from the South, you wrote it down. You didn't just write it. Tell somebody, please, with each one of the 5 things you wrote, tell somebody that you want to accomplish this by the end of the decade. Only one of 4 things can happen when you tell somebody. They will ignore you. You haven't lost anything. They'll say, you're crazy. You'll never do that. Perfect. Give me a challenge. On this book on the future of the legal profession, there are going to be a lot of people saying this can never be done. Fair enough. Some people will say, wow, I want to do that too. Can I kind of do that with you? And you might say, you cannot do this with me. You do it yourself. Or you might say, you're part of my team. We will do it together. And fourth, over time, people that ignored you might someday help you. But they'll at least know somebody's out there trying to do something. And you might contribute to their lives by telling them. Doesn't mean you start off every conversation, say, oh, let me tell you the 5 things I'm going to do. They go, whoa, you took one too many webinar seminars or programs at that ODK conference. But the point is, be conversant about it. Tell people about it, people that are close. Now, this is the biggest part of the session, but you already know how to do it. We're going to start in 2032. If you want to round things off, start in 2030 and go to 2040. Right? Now you have to, first of all, have a vision of who you are in 10 years. And what that means is you have to have a vision of what you're going to look like. In 10 years, you're going to look a lot like you look today. And if you're healthy and you're able to stay physically active and mentally active, I bet in 30 years and 40 years, you're going to look a lot like you did. Maybe weigh the same weight if you're very, very fortunate. So the key is, and by the way, the person asked about personal goals. One of your goals might be a certain level of physical fitness. It might be a certain level of mobility. You might be mobility challenged. It might be a certain level of dealing with those mobility challenges and helping others with those mobility challenges. So write down at least 3 items from 2032 to 2041. Let me give you a little bit of time to do that. Don't go past 2041 yet. List, you want to accomplish something, now list some achievement related to the activity, some benefit to you or humanity, something that will result. From what you're going to do in that decade. And be sure that that's consistent with at least your theme you have for your life or one of the themes you have for your life. Now, before I let you start to think about 2042, I want you to look and see how those 3 things you wrote down for the period 2030 to 2040 are related not only to who you are, but to what you wrote down for the things that you did, you're going to do in the next 10 years. So now, go as fast as you want. Do 2040 to 2042, 2042 to 2051, 2052 to 2061, 2062 to 2071. And as you do that, there's some people have this concept of, quote, a bucket list. I don't think in terms of buckets. I have this philosophy or myth that I like. And that myth is I'm going to live to be 120. Well, if you're going to live to be 120 and you want to be a professional golfer and you're 65 years old, you might say, well, let's do that. And you just go do it. If I want to do something, I don't put it on a list and say, do it before I die. If I want to do something, I just do it. And I start the process. Some things I want to do take 5 or 10 years to accomplish. And so I start early and start often. So the key is you write down these 3 items for each one of these decades, and you write down what benefit to humanity or you or your family there's going to be. I want you to, and you don't really need to have to put the certainty levels there at this time, because the further you go out in time, the more uncertain things are by definition, by nature. So I'm not worried. I'm not going to ask you about how confident you are. You may choose to go in a completely different direction. I know a person who is an architect, who is a book publisher, a translator, and has started a new field of architecture on the relationship between mathematics and architecture. And this person, age 64, in September, will start a 3-year bachelor's program in music. That's a direction this person didn't think about going, studied music as a child, sang, played the piano, is now playing the cello, plays a dozen instruments, and says, I want to go back to college. And this is undergraduate in Italy. 3 years, getting a separate place, about 2 hours train ride from her current place. So that wasn't in her life plan. But her life plan was to always appreciate and love music if she could, read it, play it, never teach it. She never wants to, I don't think, she wants to teach people how to play. She takes lessons all the time. And so there will be changes. But this gives you a roadmap. Have you ever been on a road to go to someplace and you see someplace you want to stop for a while? I'll never forget, I think it was on Interstate 80, and I said to the family as we're driving, can we stop and see Notre Dame? It's about 20 minutes out of the way, so that's 40 minutes extra driving. And they said, no, we have to get there. Well, I can tell you that the one time I was making that drive from Washington, D.C. to Illinois on my own, or New York to Illinois, I somehow got on Interstate 80. I think that's where it was, at South Bend. I got off the road and I spent a half a day walking around that campus. So this is your long-term vision. And I hope that if you haven't gone through all the way to 2071, that you will. You're going to have to think about what the world's going to be like, because you're going to need to continuously be doing environmental scans. Because I've had some things I wanted to do, and I wrote a book on leadership about 15 years ago. It wasn't right to publish that book. It was called The Leadership Revolution. That book can only be published after my book on future of the law profession. And so sometimes you do things, it fits in a different era. And so take a minute now and then review. Go back. Is there something you could dream a little bigger? Is there something there you could be a little bolder? Is there an audience that could be a little bigger? On the future of the legal profession, by the way, I'm writing this book for the United States. But the second edition of the book, which hopefully will be just 2 years later, I have a history of doing second editions, will be in the title will have the word international in it. And I will have scholars and professors from 40 countries. I already know how I'm going to get them participate in writing on their country relative to what I said in the book. And so the whole time, and this is why that question of my personal goals, are they equally as important as academic or professional? You have to develop your own human capital. And your human capital is the sum of your knowledge and skills, capabilities, abilities, interests. That's what human capital is. You're going to see you have to keep your health. It's essential. You have to continuously read and learn and listen and write and speak. And by the way, one of the things Maggie probably has learned, and we haven't discussed this, if you want to learn more than anybody else in the room, teach the class. So I'd have 20 people in my class at the University of Colorado, Denver, teaching them about the future of energy in their energy management program. I have to learn so much about where energy developments are going to occur, and I've worked in that field before, because I have to learn in advance so I can teach what everybody in the class is going to learn the whole semester. That's why I can read their papers and understand they're going to teach me. So form teams, you're going to have to do that. Teach when you can, speak when you can, write articles. Now we'll come up to the last exercise. I have us for about 10 more minutes. You may not have written this down. What's the theme for your life? My theme's really clear. Large contribution and personal joy. I get joy from contribution. I'm not going to do things I don't enjoy. I can even enjoy cleaning closets because I know I will enjoy looking at a clean closet. And by the way, I live in an apartment in New York. We've just recently bought a house in Virginia. We're going to live in 2 places. We've never done that before. Maybe 20 days in Virginia, 10 days in New York. I have 4 closets in New York. My wife and I have 4 closets, and they're not full. And we love that. We have more closet space in Virginia in 1 bathroom than we have in this entire house here. We have the first floor of a house. It's a very nice place. What was David Blight's theme for his life? Explain things. He's a historian. Follow the facts and tell the stories behind the facts. If you're going to be a journalist, what a great profession. I work with journalists my whole life. I was the lawyer for many people who worked for one of the greatest institutions in journalism, National Public Radio. And when a journalist gives you their opinion, that's not journalism. That's just someone talking. Journalists fact-checked what they're doing. They are one of the most important institutions in the history of the world, for the history of freedom. And so David Blight is a great historian. I know how he fact-checks everything personally, and his staff does as well. So your theme should be consistent as in the outer years, 2050, with a global theme. Or if it's inconsistent with a global theme, you have to turn the whole world around. That's not very possible usually. In my book, new book on the law, it will. One person said, this is a massive paradigm shift you're talking about in how law is practiced. That's right. And so there are only 1 million lawyers today. I will have, if I get my way, we will have 10 million people doing in 10 years what people now call practicing law. If I'm applying on helping somebody on a social security disability case, I can have a social security disability specialist do the whole thing. They don't have to be a lawyer. We can train people who are not lawyers to do 80% of what lawyers do. That's how we expand the business. So I hope your theme is a consistent theme for your life, and I hope you're realizing that you're trying to move the world in a certain direction. And maybe you can move at a big distance. You have to be somewhat, you have to know history, you have to know what changes. Most people don't know Frederick Douglass called for the Civil War in 1852. He declared what the war was going to be about, and he was not wrong. And so, let me tell you about my history so you can see where I'm coming from. My parents were born in Poland. We were the first, in Louisiana. So I grew up in Louisiana, not of Louisiana. My dad didn't have a racist bone in his body. We lived across the street from African Americans. I played golf with them. When they finally integrated the school, the swimming pools in Shreveport, Louisiana, and there were 99 African American youths, young people in the pool, and 1 white person. I was that white person. We were the first white family that worked for blacks running for office in 1964. Even a year before the Civil Rights Act, I worked with my dad. I am getting known now in the golf world. On the Golf Coaches Association of America, I'm on the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. The president, Susie Whaley, was a person of the PGA, was somebody I served as an advisor. I realized lawyers were terrible at leadership, so I wrote the book, Leadership for Lawyers. And 2004 to 2013, I helped turn Colorado blue. So that's my politics. And I'm now helping raise 4 grandchildren. We moved to New York to do that. Our daughter, she is a social justice poverty lawyer who runs a foundation. And our son's a rabbi, the chief rabbi at Yale, who started a new denomination of Judaism, which is what we call egalitarian. Men, women, people of every gender, type, or selection are treated absolutely equally. When I was 14, I became financially independent. Yes, my parents did pay for room and board. They were kind enough to do that. But I decided where I was going to college, I arranged to pay for everything that wasn't covered by a scholarship. I had 3 jobs when I was 14. I graduated from some great universities, Washington Lee, Georgetown, University of Texas, and the University of Bristol is also great. And so those themes are consistent. I know as I get older, and I'm 67, but I'm still pretty young, I know what I'm going to remember myself for. And so for you, the question is, what are you going to accomplish when you're in your 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s? Because this is not a promise, but this is a prediction. You will live to be over 100 years old. The odds are getting better. The odds are even pretty good I will live to be 100 years old. What are you going to help others accomplish starting now that they won't be able to accomplish for 5 or 10 years? When you work with grandkids, I'm teaching them things that they're not even going to use for 20 years. And so I ask you, reflect. Maybe write down 4 things, 4 new thoughts that you've had because of this seminar, this program today. Keep thinking about it. And so the final theme of this, I want to improve as a golfer in order to play in a particular tournament. I wanted to play in it in 2022. I have to qualify in 2021. It might be 2023. I need to improve my golf game by, let's say, 5 strokes. So if you were a jogger and you ran 9-minute or 8-minute miles, you're now going to need to run 6.5-minute miles. That's what that means. It's a big change. My golf coach, my golf instructor said, well, Herb, you're very good in every